So thank you, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Oops. What's happening? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for being here, wherever you're joining from. I'm Alex Delipalta. I am the work package lead for communications at the WorldFAIR project. And today we will be hearing from the case study on agricultural biodiversity. Before I give the floor on to our speakers, just a quick housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded. The recording is going to be uploaded on the project's YouTube channel and on our website, and it will be also emailed to you, our participants, after this meeting. Please feel free to post any questions that come up during the presentations in the chat. There will be a dedicated Q&A session with our panel of speakers at the very end, and we will address all the questions at that time. Now, before I begin, in April this month, we have one more webinar coming up of our webinar series. We will hear from chemistry and nanomaterials on the 22nd of April at 1 UTC. And in May, we will hear from the cultural heritage and social surveys case studies, geochemistry and disaster risk reduction, and population health. All the dates and registration information about the WorldFAIR webinar series, as well as recordings of past webinars from 2023, can be found on our website. And I will also put the link into the chat after this. So, our agenda for today, we will start with an overview of the case study and the work that has happened so far by Deborah Drucker, who is the work package lead for the case study on agricultural biodiversity. Then we will proceed to a series of lightning talks, 5-minute long lightning talks. And at the very end, all of our speakers will have a panel conversation and will also address audience questions. So remember to please post them into the chat. And that's it from me. Deborah, on to you.
Thanks, Alex. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm Deborah Drucker. I work at Embrapa, the Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation, and I am the lead of this WorldFAIR Agricultural Biodiversity case study. So we are going to talk about reuse and plant pollinating their data sets, a global perspective, inspired with guidelines and recommendations inspired by pilot studies from Africa, the Americas, and Europe. So Alex already showed the agenda today. I'm not going to read that in details, but I'm going to give you an overview of our case study, and followed by 6 lightning talks from our pilot studies. And we reserved 20 minutes in the end for the panel discussion. So we really invite you to add your questions to the chat and throughout the webinar. And I hope we have a nice time to interact in the end with all the presenters and with the attendees. So the Agricultural Biodiversity case study was proposed by IGAD, the Research Alliance, Data Alliance community of practice dedicated to agricultural data. As a community of practice, we gathered several communities and realized that there was a huge interest in plant-pollinator interactions data worldwide. So to name a few, we had some members from the Biodiversity Information Standards Interest Group, the TEDWIC, on biological interactions data. And also the SURPASS project, which is a collaboration between several countries in South America and the UK. And we gathered collaborators from several organizations to propose this case study, namely the Mice Botanic Garden in Belgium, the Kenyan Agricultural and Livestock Research Organization, a startup called Hive Tracks, and also the RDA Association. And also we have several collaborators in kind from many organizations worldwide, including the Brazilian Network of Plant Pollinations Interaction, the REBIP. So our case study objective is to ensure fair data for understanding plant-pollinator interactions at biologically relevant scales for crops. In the first year, we conducted task 10.1, which we call the discovery phase. It was finalized in July last year, and I will talk about that more in a minute. And in the second part of the project, we conducted 6 pilot studies, and today we are going to have the opportunity to hear from our colleagues about their experiences with the pilots. And we have published the deliverables 10.2 and 10.3 in February this year, and we will explore the pilot phase in more detail today. So in a nutshell, in the discovery phase, we conducted a landscape analysis of the plant pollination data practices worldwide. And we found that a huge amount of data is in supplementary files of research articles, and that most of them that we found are lacking fairness in many aspects. Data formats, lack of semantic resources, and among others, which is a challenge not only for researchers, but for data administrators, editorial boards, publishers, and scientific societies. So you can find more about this work conducted on the discovery phase in the WorldFAIR page. So in the pilot phase, we adopted a data standardization strategy based on the following initiatives: the data schema and vocabulary documented in this paper from José Salim and collaborators, the data standardization of plant-pollinator interactions, the ecological metadata language, the global biotic interactions platform, GLOBI, which aims to make species interaction datasets easier to find, access, reuse using open source software. We also work together with GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, in 2 pilots to explore the new data model for biotic interactions, and tested the beta version of the integrated publishing toolkit, the IPT, based on events. So if you are interested in this particular topic with GBIF, we promoted a webinar in September last year, and the recording and materials are available in the link that someone is going to share with you, please, in the chat. So our work with the pilot studies applying this data standardization strategy that I just mentioned allowed us to develop best practices and guidelines, recommendations. We also estimated cost of the adoption of the standards, and we produced a fair data assessment tool. So you can find more details about all that we produced in our deliverables. They are all linked in this web page from the WorldFAIR project. You can find everything there. We also, the GLOBI, the Global Biotic Interactions platform, developed a dedicated page to the pilot studies. Some of the data sets are totally open, and even the ones that are not totally open, you can find the data review. So please feel free to explore what we have produced in the GLOBI web page. We also developed a cookbook based on to be used by people that want to make the data fair, and a tutorial to standardize a plant pollinator data set with OpenRefine to be shared with the Brazilian network platform. And last but not least, we also developed this fair assessment rubric in the deliverable 10.3. So now we are going to have the lightning talks from our colleagues from the pilot studies. We are having 6 lightning talks of 5 minutes each, starting with Rocio González Vaquero from University of Buenos Aires. Rocio, please, you can start your presentation.
Thank you, Deborah. I work at the Facultad de Agronomía of Universidad de Buenos Aires. The faculty has conducted several studies on plant-pollinator interactions, particularly Mariano Devoto, a researcher and professor at the faculty. He and his students have performed several samplings in the Pampas region. This region is located in central Argentina. It also extends in Uruguay and southern Brazil. And the region is characterized by intensive cultivation with soybean, maize, and wheat as the main crops. This region is crucial for the country's productivity. Next, please. In this pilot, we standardized 5 datasets, which comprise 5,000 records taken in 120 different sites into subregions of the Pampas. Each dataset was an Excel spreadsheet where each row represented the interaction between an individual plant and a species of flower visitor. The number of flower visitor individuals was recorded in a column named frequency. The standardization process involved several steps. First, we start cleaning the data. We also added valuable information that was important to share and that it wasn't present in the original spreadsheet. Then we performed the standardization of the data. We transformed the data to meet Darwin Core standard using the revived PV vocabulary, and we performed the taxonomic validation of the species. We registered the time each of these steps took for each of the datasets to evaluate the cost of the whole process. Well, 2 of these datasets had been published and 2 belong to thesis in progress. And the samplings were performed in field margins and when the crop had flowers that attracted visitors, the crop was sampled as well. In these cases, soybean, sunflower, and potato. Next, please. And well, we have learned a lot in the process. One recommendation that we can give is that it's very necessary to plan carefully before embarking in a standardization project. And a realistic estimation of the time investment is necessary. Some questions worth asked are what datasets will be standardized, how clean they are, can the persons who made these datasets, can they be reached for further information in case some information is not there and perhaps it's useful to share. These are all things that we need to consider. For example, if a spreadsheet has a lot of typographical mistakes, that will slow down the whole process. Also, if dates and coordinates are in different formats, that will difficult the standardization of the data in mass. Well, also the person who will conduct the work, we need to consider background in biological sciences is needed with knowledge of botanical and zoological nomenclature, and database management skills are also necessary.
Sorry, Rocio, you're muted.
Rocio, we are not hearing you anymore. I think you're muted.
Yes, sorry, I'm not sure when I stopped. Well, the person who conducted the work also has to be considered, the profile of this person. I'm not sure if what you heard, but a background in biological sciences is needed. And the tools that this person will be using to standardize the data has to be considered. For this pilot, we applied two methods. We compared two methods: a manual approach, where only basic Excel skills were needed, and a semi-automatic approach, where you need to use the OpenRefine, which is a powerful program to standardize large data sets. We have written a tutorial, a step-by-step tutorial, to be able to standardize any database with Plant-Pollinator information. Well, thank you. And the next speaker is José Augusto Salim.
Thank you, Rocio. I'm José Augusto Salim. I work at University of Campinas in Brazil, and I'm a member of a Brazilian network on plant-pollinator interactions, REBIP. REBIP is a collaborative network of experts in pollination biology that aims to study pollination interactions in their various dimensions, including conservation, agriculture, ecosystem service, and so on. And the network encouraged the development of scientific education activities in the area, specifically in Brazil. And there are members in the 5 socioeconomic regions in Brazil, and the network it's growing. That's more members are coming part of the network. Next, please. In the pilot phase, we work with 6 data sets from colleagues from the network that sent it to us. I would like to thank Luisa, Pedro, Bruno, Denise, Carla, and Isabella to provide the data sets. And the data sets they vary in the size and the format. So some of them have few interactions. Some of them have more than 20,000 interactions. Most of them are about plants and insects interactions, but we have also with mammalian and aves and hamburgs, for example. The geographic coverage of the data sets, or they are focused in Brazil. We have one from Luisa that's the data set. The data was collected in England, and the interaction type recorded are just visits. So we are not having pollination, but flower visitation data set. Next, please. So the lessons learned during the standardization process of the data sets that we would like to highlight here is about data transformation. So we got the raw data sets in the specific formats that the researchers use it for their proposals, and then we try to transform to a template that's used in the Brazilian network for standardization, data standardization. And what we realize that this is a time and cost consuming process, and this is related to the format and the structure of the data set. So depends of the format and depends of the structure of the data set, we need more time, and this costs more for data transformation. So think about the format and the structure is very important before actually record the data, because if you need to transform data after this you matter. And also some of the data sets are not structured in a row-wise structure, so the interactions are not represented in one line in the spreadsheet. So one row, one line in the spreadsheet, it's sometimes represent a whole interaction, though you have the both partnership of the interaction and the interaction type. But it's sometimes, for example, for matrix or networks that we have some different structure. This is more difficult to transform data, and sometimes you have 3 or 4 tables that are related and not just one flat file. So this is difficult because Darwin Core standard and Darwin Core archives, so they are originally developed to work with flat files. It's simplified if you work with flat files. You can work with relational models like the star schema, but working with flat files, it's much simpler. And finally, our advice for research and data authors is that they must recognize the significance of structuring their data efficiently. And efficiently, we mean to worry and take a look to the format and the structure of the data set, because after the process for verification of the data sets, you'll be very, very simplified if the format and the structure and the vocabularies choose to use, you'll be simplified. It depends of the choices. So the template that we use from Rebipi simplifies that, because you already have the Darwin Core terms and the Plant-Pollinator vocabulary terms in the spreadsheet, so just have to fill that. But better than that is just to restarting recording data using the table, the spreadsheet, instead of transforming data from one format, one structure to the other. So that's our summarized lessons here, and thank you very much. And now I turn to Mu Kazina. Thank you.
I don't think Mu is here with us today, so I'll try to do my best to present his slides. So Mu Kazina is a researcher from KAURO, the Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Research Organization, which is a government research agency. And it's mandated to carry out research for crops and livestock for enhanced value chains performance. Pollinator interaction studies are part of the wider agricultural researchers carried out by the agency. So in the pilot that KAURO conducted, they focused on collecting a database for all what they call real plant-pollinator interactions based on published records. So it was a literature survey. The interactions associated with possible successful deliverable pollination service was what they were looking for. And taxons of interest included those with complete interaction. The area was focused on studies done in Africa. So this is a sample of the data that KAURO surveyed. So for the lessons learned, plant pollination interactions studies are less defined in Africa. We need more studies to define relationships. There is little information on plant pollinator interactions from Africa in international databases such as GLOBE. There is need to increase shareable information about plant pollinator interactions from Africa in the global arena. So I hope Mu is happy with how I presented his slides. And now I'm going to hand over to Chris Taliga from USDA. Please, Chris.
Thank you so much, Deborah. My name is Christine Taliga. I work with the United States Department of Agriculture. And me, along with my co-collaborators, Dr. Cynthia Parr with the Agricultural Research Service, Dr. Diana Cox-Foster with the Agricultural Research Service, and Dr. Elizabeth Hill with the Office of the Chief Scientist are part of a collaborative within the department of experts working on inter and intra-governmental efforts to promote fair data principles. Next slide, please. And as part of this effort with the WorldFAIR pilot program, we developed a prototype utilizing the U.S. National Pollinating Insect Collection, which houses over 2 million specimens of bee and plant associations. And we work with the National Plants Database, which houses over 35 plant species, and we're developing plant associations for those plant species. So in the development process of this prototype, we utilized the database of the National Pollinating Insect Collection and the United States Geological Survey's Northern Prairie Wildlife Research Center Pollinator Library data to refine and develop data fields for our future dataset development. So the prototype that we developed was mainly to develop that data framework and define these data fields. And I'd like a special thank you to Dr. Clint Otto with USGS, Harold Eicher with the National Pollinating Insect Collection, and the CERCI staff, Jennifer Hopwood and Julia Brokaw, that helped us put this prototype development together. Next slide. So the main lessons learned for us in this project was to allow time for research and training to facilitate the interoperability standards within the initial framework of the data design. As we learned during this process that the biodiversity standards are not as common as you would like to think. And so to develop time for staff training to understand the framework was something that we hadn't anticipated. Additionally, the controlled vocabulary and associated definition development is crucial and is also necessary to look through the various different data sources and determine the best vocabulary and controlled definitions to utilize for your project, as to not reinvent information that is already out there, and to really help facilitate the interoperability component, both within a department like the Department of Agriculture and outside of the Department of Agriculture with collaborators that we're working with. It's really essential in us speaking the same language and working on a similar framework. And the interactions and the collaborators that we gain from this project, from this pilot project, have really been incredible in strengthening our data set design. So the REBEEP template, working with collaborators that are also involved in database design has really been instrumental, and highly recommend similar collaborations for embarking on similar projects. With that, I would like to turn it over to Max Runsell.
Thank you so much, Christine. Yeah, my name is Max Runsell. I'm the CEO and co-founder of HiveTracks. It's a pleasure to be here. We are a North Carolina, US-based nature tech startup, and we offer a technology platform for beekeepers, beekeeping organizations, and extension officers to track hive health, authenticate honey origin, or the terroir of honey, if you like, and monitor biodiversity. Over the last 2 years, HiveTracks has been used by over 5,000 beekeepers across 70 countries. And we have particular projects in East Africa, Central Asia, and North America, where we work with research and government entities to keep track of the health of hives and improve the local biodiversity monitoring. Next slide. Our data set in particular, you can see the screenshots of what the app, the mobile app looks like, is skewed towards occurrences. So it's a lot about apiary and hive locations, including colony and queens. The key interactions we record are mite colony interactions, and plant-pollinator interactions and pollination events. So as you can see from the track here, it is an automated process, and that can be used for any beekeeper collecting their data that could be automatically mapped. This pilot in particular was very relevant to us as we started to use our internal data and started to understand what it would take to take any type of interaction data that is recorded and have it live mapped to the ReRIP standard, for example, whenever data is entered. In April, we're getting about 1 record every 8 minutes, and we're incredibly excited to now use this in additional projects where basically the entire pipeline is set up to a degree that the data entry by an individual user can go directly to the standardized format. Next slide. And for us, the most interesting thing is being the only private sector actor definitely involved a big learning curve. But it's really important to us to encourage other private sector entities to work with academic institutions to standardize data, mostly within a sandbox environment. And that's something that is really, really interesting, how the data verifications and assessments can be done with robust data privacy handling in place, as the hive locations are a trade secret for beekeepers. So it's very feasible to do it on a pilot data set just to understand how our data schema can be involved and can be adapted to the international standards. And what is most exciting to us is a couple of things. One, what the lessons learned from this project allowed us to launch our mobile app for free at the beginning of this year. That was the first step. The second step was to include the ability to add a flowering site. So not just apiary and yard locations, but also flowering sites. And now what we are looking, there's 3 new projects we will be launching this year, and all of these projects that will be government funded will have our standardization efforts as a core part. And the interesting aspect of any type of project that we're launching is to take the lessons learned and start with them from the beginning, right? So really understand how this data standardization and the data verification approach can inform the type of data that is being collected, the means of collecting the data, all the way up to the standardization of the data entry and even feature development. As the next step, again, is to use this when we launch in Ethiopia and in Uzbekistan later this year. And also, spurred by this interest, we're launching a new feature to directly move into the native pollinator assessment. So using the fit count analogy to really become a tool that has a heavier focus on the plant-pollinator interaction, with the ability to have more of a machine learning AI-based detection of flowers and insects, and move toward having an assessment of both managed pollinators, native pollinators, floral resources, and the interactions of these 3 areas. So we're incredibly excited and thankful for the collaborations, for what we've learned throughout this project, and we look forward to taking this standardization project to the private sector and to the industry, and having it as one of our core parts for every project we do moving forward. Thank you very much, and I'll be passing it on to Juliana.
Thank you very much, Max. I'm Juliana Cardona. I'm a professor at Biology and Ecology programs at CES University in Colombia. I have been working with some colleagues and students in wild ecosystems, affording topics like taxonomy, insect behavior, and also traits that mediate those interactions. In the last 4 years, we have been working together, please next, with the Sistema de Información en Biodiversity from Colombia, promoting data mobilization to an open systems. Please next. Then we have been working in some wild ecosystems, and our first data set came from a interaction network from a strategic ecosystem here in Medellin, nearby our city. We have been working in some insect-plant interactions, and most of the interactions that we work with came from beetles, bugs, and flies. And many of them were from pollination, visitation, and even nesting behaviors. most of our records were already cleaned, and we adjust them to the Revit template. Please, next, Deborah. We use all the plant information, interactions, and animal information also. Finally, we include some information from a data set that was previously published as a paper in pollination system in a Samia species that is endemic from our country. This data set we included in another, the new IPT model from GB. Please, next. In fact, we learned a lot of things during this pilot, because we took a data set that was previously prepared in a standard Darwin curve. And then it was great to rescue some information that there were going to be lost. We think that we need to make protocols, including recommendations for taking detailed field notes. Like, for example, you can take insects behavior information. You can also take a state of floral structures where they are predated, for example, or other kind of interactions. On the other hand, we think that people that is working on standardization of this kind of information must have previous knowledge, because you have at least some skills in Excel, and in fact, open refined knowledge, it's very, very useful. On the other hand, it is important to complement the control vocabulary for a wider range of insects groups and also for plant groups, because we found some issues when we were working with the Samia pilot. And finally, when we were working with this pilot, we find some issues also when we were trying to include temperature or other kind of information from a systematic ecology project in the assessment. So we feel that we need to define in a very detailed way the usage of those assertions. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Juliana, and all the speakers. I would like also to thank Dr. Mu, who is now with us. So we are going to start our panel discussion, and I'm very happy to have all of you here together. So I will stop sharing my screen, but before I do that, I just wanted to show the institutions that are involved, and thank you very much for participating in this effort of our case study. But now we are going to move to our panel discussion. So thank you all for being here. Did we have any questions from the attendees?
Yes.
So please.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Yes.
please go ahead.
So I've been, I shared a link to a document earlier in the chat, and I'll do it again. And some people have been sharing their questions in the document towards the end. So thank you for doing that. And please feel free to open up your mic and ask the question yourself. I'll also go over it, just to sort of make sure that all the questions are being asked. But before we do so, please take a minute to share where you're coming from in the chat, just to see how, like, where people are and like how the weather is, where they're calling in from. So I'm calling in from Minneapolis, in Minnesota, and it's a cloudy day.
So is there a question somebody would like to make from voice and audio? Please feel free to.
As people are sharing the weather conditions and where they are in the chat, if they'd like, I'll ask the question. So I had some prepared questions, but I'll start with the ones that were not prepared. So one of the questions is, there have been increasing and important efforts to push for open science frameworks to enable data sharing and integration, but some have noted that these frameworks have the potential to neglect the rights of indigenous people and their protocols for cultural and ecological information. Has the development of any of your databases integrated principles of indigenous data sovereignty? And if so, what advice do you have for other groups to do this? So, looking at the panelists, I'm sure that there's many people that have some experience with this. Anybody wants to take this question? Maybe Liana or Rocio? Max? Deborah?
Yeah, I think the one thing on the data sovereignty that again we have been mostly working with beekeepers whose location is private and kind of they own their own information because their livelihoods directly depend upon their data that they're collecting. And I think that is something that what we learned in particular is to be very clear about that in the forefront and kind of understand what the guardrails are, what is important for users of the data or the beneficiaries of the data to use. And it's a compromise that can be worked toward. And I think as long as that's open, and Jared, we've had these conversations as well, there is information about the structure or the metadata that you can share without sharing the actual data. And I think that's a lot of it has to do again with like fair data doesn't need to be open data in the first place. And I think that's a very, very, very interesting differentiation. So like really having a clear strategy and learning a lot about how you want to tackle the data and how you want to tackle kind of who owns the data in the beginning. And then you can devise your fair strategy around the principles that you have to use your data. So I would say it's very surmountable. It's very feasible. It just requires being very cautious and conscientious about who you're working with and what you're trying to accomplish to make sure that it works in the long term.
Okay, so you're talking about the sort of the sensitivity of some of the data, but this is not necessarily indigenous data, correct?
To some degrees it is. For some of the projects where we work, it is where it's similar to supply.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody else want to add anything to this?
I would like to say that we have the FAIR principles that is most that's very related to the data. It's not a matter if it's indigenous data or any kind of data. And but we have also there are people working with the CARE principles. There are that is specific for governance of indigenous data, knowledge, and data. So I think both of this group of principles, FAIR and CARE, work together so we can try to give the proper rights for the indigenous people when we take a look at these principles. But, of course, they are not they are being developed, and its community are helping to develop them. So I think it's participation. It's important.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I've added some notes in the shared document, and if you could add some links to the FAIR and CARE principles, that'd be great. So basically, what you're saying is that in addition to FAIR, there's also something called CARE, which is more focused on the cultural aspect of data sharing, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else who wants to chime in on this question? Feel free to sort of speak up if you think of something you'd like to say. So this is a question for Jose. Do you have recommendations on integrating data sets that are not already digitized into spreadsheets and database formats? For instance, old natural history studies where the data is written in PDF, in narrative form, or in tables embedded in PDFs. How to do this on a large scale?
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, what I can say is that if someone is going to do this, it's preferable to study some proper formats before starting the process, because we have many different standards. Like we use Darwin Core standards, that's the most used for biodiversity data, but we have vocabularies and ontology that you can put on top of that. So before starting this process, it's interesting to look through the options of the standards and vocabularies, and then figure out this process of transformation. Using spreadsheets, they're like the Rebipi one that we use here. They are already using terms from Darwin Core and the Plant-Pollinator vocabulary, but it does not cover all the possibilities. Juliana has talked about that. There are many missing terms that we can include in the plant pollination. And I think that the important thing is to think about what this building blocks, these terms that you need before we starting to look at data. So and then this can simplify the work of data transformation from PDF on literature, for example, for a spreadsheet or any other format. But that's
okay. Thank you. So there was a question for Juliana. Can you share more about your process for the expansion of controlled vocabulary for a wider range of insect and plant taxa?
Okay, it's because when we began to standardize or to move our Darwin Core to the Revit template, we felt that some expressions or some vocabulary is think about bees, you know, and we found some beetles, many beetles, some flies, and for example, mouth parts, the template is designed for bees. And when we began to put all the information, for example, from the SAMIA project in the new IPT, we find that some of the vocabulary is stuck for angiosperms, not for gymnosperms. So in gymnosperms, you don't have flowers, you have cones, you don't have, I don't know, some specific structures, and the vocabulary is stuck for this kind of plants. And I think that it must be expanded, and in fact we love to work on this kind of expansion of the vocabulary, because we have been working in wild systems, and sometimes, for example, orchids have very different terms. They have polinias, and they have sepals where the flies land, and those things. So we think that we need to expand the vocabulary.
Okay, so what you're saying is that you made an effort to look for the existing vocabularies, right? And then you took your own data and then you tried to make it fit. And then
Yes.
sometimes it didn't fit and you came up with a list of the ones that you wanted to add, right? The
Yes.
terms that needed to be added, or, and how did you go about doing that? Like, did you communicate this list to the people that are maintaining the vocabulary?
In fact, we try to include some of the specific words in the spreadsheets, and we documented the specific definition for the term, for the structure, and we hope to contribute to expand those vocabularies.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. So it's really cool to see the reuse of existing vocabularies and people being patient enough to use them and then try and improve them. So that takes a lot of patience, I think.
Hey, George, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So I'd like to ask Dr. Mu and also yourself why there is little information on plant-pollinator interactions from Africa in international databases like GLOBE. Why do you think that this is the case?
Okay, thank you, Barbara, for this. Sorry for late coming. Yes, we find that the database from Africa is not so much. And one of the reasons, I think my colleague from Colombia, who has just indicated that we have had some challenges in terms of the keywords that are used. And you find that also in Africa, some of studies and adaptations. So, and the interaction data is a bit complicated because students or researchers don't want to repeat what has been done elsewhere. And therefore, some of the studies, most of the studies done is not able, you are not able to get some of these keywords in the databases. But also the participation of African scientists in development and use of those databases has been low. And I think that is one of our major challenge, having African scientists to contribute or to participate in development and contribution of the databases would increase information in these databases from Africa. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to add to that, from I'm very happy to work with folks that share pollination data from all over the world. And what I know from my own experience is that I simply don't know a lot of people from that region, and it's just bias that I have. So I'd love to continue to work with Muo and colleagues to make sure that the vast amount of data that must be there is represented in things like GLOBE. So there's a question from Wanya, I think.
Thank you. Good afternoon in Kenya. Thank you very much for this seminar. I'm sorry I came late because I was in another meeting, but from what Dr. Muo Kasina has said, it is very, very important that we do get to know how to package the data we are collecting to be able to fit in with the databases that you're talking about. There's a lot of research done on pollination, but if there's a way we can collaborate and be able to now repackage that data to fit to be in the system, I think you'll find that there will be quite a bit of information that is required. And I would like to request that since you are talking about pollination, if any one of you is working on bees, we are looking for speakers in our African branch of the International Union of Social Insects. And so if any one of you is willing to be a speaker, please get in touch with me. Mo Kasina has my contact, so it is easy for him to share my contacts. Thank you very much. I'm Wanja Kenodia from the National Museums of Kenya, where we have all the specimens, insect specimens. So it's easy to get that data. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Wanja, for your comment. I really encourage you to take a look on the results from our case study. They are all public. If you didn't see this part of the webinar, it's going to be available soon. And I really think that Dr. Moore could represent us in this effort that you mentioned, but in case you are looking for someone else, we can talk about that. I see we are reaching the top of the hour, and Philippe, you would like, maybe we can have a really last question? Or?
Yeah, well, it's just a quick comment, because for me, this kind of comment that Wanja, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, it's exactly the kind of result, the kind of reach that we wanted to have with this project, because yeah, we noticed that there is a gap between data stewards, people working with the FAIR data principles, and people who are collecting data and producing these data sets. So this is really interesting that you brought this, your case to this table, because yeah, I think it would be really interesting to have someone from our team to talk in this conference, because yeah, well, if people get to learn about these standards, what they need to do, the approximate costs of implementing it, then we can really reach our goal of bringing these principles for people, for the scientists in the field to understand what they are and how to apply them. So this is very interesting. And we can talk later about it, Deborah and others, and then maybe we could think of someone that we could send to this conference.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I would love to stay here longer. I feel that we have much more to talk about, but we are reaching the top of the hour here. And I know that Alex has some final information to share with us. So I just wanted to thank you all. Thank you all the colleagues from the work package. It's been great working with you. Thank you all attendees. I think we overloaded you with links in the chat, but you can see all our outputs and contact information. And we would be happy to continue this interaction by email and other sources. Thank you very much. Alex, please.
Thanks all. And just to say that we can share the information shared in the chat with you alongside the recording via email after the meeting, if that would be useful. So I will share my screen again, and I will very briefly let you know that the WorldFAIR project is coming to an end this summer at the end of May, and we are having the final meeting of the project as part of the RDA virtual plenary 22, which takes place on the 14th till the 23rd of May. So the WorldFAIR project will have two collocated sessions. The first one will be on the 22nd of May from 12 to 2 UTC, where a selection of our case studies will describe their works and emphasize their recommendations and guidelines, as well as I give their experience on using the FIPS. And the second session will be on the 23rd of May at 12 UTC. And this session will be focused on the cross-domain interoperability framework. The registration link, I will put it in the chat, and it's also on the WorldFAIR website. So with that, we hope to see you there. And I would like to join our speakers and Deborah in thanking you all for being here. It has been a great webinar, and we will share all the information with you via email. So thanks again for being here.